What's the weirdest thing you've ever caught someone doing? I was the one who got caught. I was listening to a lot of DMX at the time and was practicing barking like him, and practicing his raspy voice in what I thought was an empty room in my office. My coworker pokes his head around the corner and says, "Are you barking?" I was. Story 2. My friend used to like the smell of pencils, but not just plain pencils. Pencils that had been in the oven for a while. It would be weird to walk into a room and he would be sniffing hot pencils. Story 3. Walked in on my 18-year-old cousin pleasuring himself on my bed with my laptop at the family Christmas party when I was 14. He was smelling a pair of my used underwear and was just going at it. Strangely enough, he got arrested and charged for banging a minor, and has spent the last couple years in jail. I don't know if this is strange as much as just unsettling. Kinda wild to do this at the family Christmas party though, but when you think about it, these kind of people aren't thinking that logically anyway, so I guess why not to them. Story 4. I was walking up to a friend's place and looked through the window, and saw his roommate sitting alone in the semi-darkness, chugging ranch dressing from the bottle. He saw me see him drinking it. He put it down very quickly and I went and knocked. The roommate answered the door and I just pretended I hadn't seen him and never said anything about it to him to this day. Story 5. I was waiting in my car to pick up my boyfriend from campus and a guy was making his way across the otherwise empty sidewalk, gesticulating wildly while conversing angrily with a squirrel. The squirrel was following him and every few feet he would turn around to yell at it. It would stop and listen to him, but every time he tried to walk off, the squirrel resumed following him and the whole cycle would start over. It was amazing. I'll never forget it. Story 6. Park ranger here. Part of my responsibilities are to lock bathrooms after the parks close. Walked into a single-stall bathroom to find a small, approximately 50-year-old Asian man in this bathroom. He was 100% naked, staring into the mirror, vigorously pleasuring himself. As soon as I walked into the room, he turned around, looked at me, then turned back to the mirror and continued. Had no idea what to do. They don't train you for that stuff. While not the Asian representation in these stories I would like to see, I will take it. Story 7. I once saw an elderly woman at our storage unit. She walked in with a handful of letters, and when she opened her locker, there was nothing inside but a heap of unopened letters that was almost as tall as she was. We left before she did, and she apparently had parked next to us, because there was a car that had the interior completely filled with mail. There was literally only a small space for the driver. Everything else all the way to the ceiling was mail. Story 8. Worked at a factory, was taking a dump, opened the stall door when I was finished, and I see this coworker who is kind of a nutty older guy. Anyway, we had these big round metal fountain-style sinks in the middle of our floor. He is standing there wearing his work pants and his shirt is off, and he is fully lathering up his whole body with soap and water. I'm just looking at him like, what the hell? Finally, I say, "We can't shower in here, man." Turns out a hydraulic hose had burst, soaking him in fluid. He was just trying to clean it off while someone fetched a company picnic t-shirt from a box in the office that he could wear home. It was really funny though. I thought he had finally cracked. Story 9. I've told this story before, but it remains the oddest thing that I've ever had the misfortune of overhearing. One of my friends has a housemate with a rather interesting evening routine, and he had, as far as I know, absolutely no idea that anyone else was aware of it. His first step, at least from what I could hear, would be to close his door and address some imaginary woman who had apparently sneaked inside when he wasn't looking. "Whoa, what are you doing here?" he'd say, his voice audible through the wall. "Uh-huh, oh, really? Well, I guess I'd better take my pants off then." A few seconds would pass, after which he would speak again. "So, how about you get naked too? I'll just lay here and wait for you to be ready." "Oh, you're ready now? Well, go ahead and climb on top of me then." It would be several minutes before anything else would become, audible, but then the next part of his routine would begin. Anyone within earshot would hear the guy's bedroom door open and then slam, after which he would sprint down to the hallway to the bathroom and slam that door. He would be in there for a couple of minutes, the toilet would flush, and then we'd all be treated to a second performance of him slamming the door, running down the hall, and locking himself in his bedroom. So, in short order, his routine went like this. Click. "Oh, look, a sneaky woman. Now we're both naked." Silence. Slam. Rapid footsteps. Slam. Silence. Toilet flushing. Slam. More rapid footsteps. Slam. From what I've heard, he would do this every night. At one point, someone suggested he might have been talking to a webcam model or something, so they accidentally reset the router after hearing the guy's door close. But he went right through the same old routine, talking to someone who wasn't there before making a hasty retreat to the bathroom. Make fun of this person all you like. At least he has structure in his life. That's more than I can say for me right now. Story 10. Puddle Man. What a guy. No idea who he was. I used to deliver pizza in Seattle downtown. Cool job, got to know the whole city. As you probably know, it rains here often. There's a stretch of old Highway 99, aka Aurora Avenue, just barely north of downtown where the road starts to change from a highway into a city street. Old hotel there that has way too many stories for comfort. Also importantly, a dip in the road over by the curb where rainwater would pool during heavy precipitation. Puddle Man would stand right there, on the corner in the rain, right next to the fast-moving highway and the large pool of rainwater on the road. We saw him all the time. Puddle Man was fat, really fat, and he wore a yellow rain slicker with the hood up. Sometimes he was under an umbrella, because he didn't want to get rained on, pretty sensible. Oh, except he forgot to button the rain slicker up, and he forgot to wear pants. Puddle Man would stand right there for hours, in the perfect spot to get completely soaked by huge waves of water that would be splashed up by all the cars driving past. Calmly, facing the street, no expression on his face, rain bouncing from his hood or umbrella, just letting the waves wash over him as car after car fwoomed through his puddle. It was weird, but it was awesome. It looked kind of fun. I and the other pizza drivers would swerve toward him a little just to get deeper into the dip and make a bigger wave. I almost knocked him off his feet during one particularly heavy downpour. I like to think he appreciated that. He never seemed to get tired of it. Puddle Man was a weird cat with a weird habit, but he really had something figured out about life. Some 20 years later, I still think about the guy, incongruous with his raincoat and umbrella, patient and zen as any other surfer, as he waited for the next wave. If he wore pants, I would be a little more on board with Puddle Man, I think. As it stands, it's just a little too weird for me. I get live your life, but also wear some pants in public. Story 11. At my old college dorm, a bunch of us were drinking beer in the room of the guy across the hall from me. Towards the end of the night, we saw him fill up one of those deep plastic chairs with what must have been a half-gallon of pee. He had staggered up to it with his eyes half closed, and as soon as his knees bumped into it, he unzipped and let loose. He was very drunk. The next morning, I hear a loud, "Who peed in my chair?" coming from across the hall, and he came out of his room and started pounding on doors. He refused to believe that he was the one who peed in his own chair, despite all of us seeing him do it. Story 12. I was an altar boy in my Lutheran church in the mid-'80s. I was not in the rotation of this particular weekend, but was in the congregation the Sunday of the event. Our confirmation class was full of red-blooded Midwest farm boys, who, as the elders say, were full of the devil. If you were in confirmation, you did altar duty. My buddies Craig and Mike were working this particular service. It was the week after we had dead plants on the altar. It's some stuff to do with Lent, if I recall correctly. In our church, there's a little room off the altar where we could go get our robes and candle lighting sticks. I'm atheist and paid no attention to any of this pageantry. Also in that room was the old-school mimeograph, the type that used a sheet of ink to make copies of the weekly handouts, etc. So the dead plants are in there. Unknown to these two fine upstanding young men, the little old ladies had treated these dead plants with 80s hairspray to keep them from shedding all over the altar. You can see where this is going. Craig decides to touch an open flame to one of the plants. It immediately bursts into flame like last year's Christmas tree. In their panic, they throw it in the trash can, full of mimeograph ink sheets. It's a 2-foot metal trash can with 6 feet of flames shooting upward. What's Craig do? He grabs it and runs out the door past the altar, down the stairs, drops the can in the middle of the stunned congregation, yells, "Frick," and kicks it down the aisle. It was epic. 32 years later, I still laugh loudly thinking about it. Burned off all his eyebrows and ruined the carpet. Story 13. I got back to my apartment after classes some years ago to find my boyfriend of 2 weeks crouching on top of my kitchen counter, washing his dong and balls in the sink. My immediate reaction was to just keep on walking and not ask questions. I put my backpack on the coffee table and started playing some Soul Calibur. I waited for him to finish up and come into the living room before I put down my controller and asked, why? He was going to surprise me by having dinner ready when I got off class. He knew I liked spicy food and was making us fajitas. He sliced up the habaneros without gloves, and then went to pee without thoroughly washing his hands. I laughed my ass off, thanked him for the kind gesture, and we both enjoyed some fajitas. Then later, when the whole thing was forgotten, foreplay ensued. It was not funny when I was sitting in a cold bath for the following 20 minutes. Chili oils are no frickin' joke. Story 14. When we were kids, we were jerks, I'll admit it. Anyway, we were going over to this other kid's house and knock on the door. He doesn't answer, so we decide to roll around back to see if he was in the backyard. He knew we were coming over, by the way. As we go around, we hear this god-awful sound like an animal was being beat to death. We look in through the sliding glass door and we see this guy banging the family's poodle. He's just going to town on the poor toe slipper. At first, we were all, no, we did not just see that. We didn't want to see this, but alas, we did. He was forever dubbed Poodle Banger. He pretty quickly moved to a different school due to emotional distress. I still wonder how the poor dog was doing. Edit. Someone asked what a toe slipper is. It's a small yapping dog that when you kick it, only your toe fits. I don't know, I don't kick dogs. I was around 15 when the incident took place. The kid in question was really short, like 4 foot nothing, and he hadn't matured as much as the rest of us during that time. I mentioned we were all jerks. Yeah, we told everyone, and I mean everyone, about the incident. The kid, and I'm assuming the dog, were both tormented by the whole thing, hence him disappearing from my memory. I don't even remember his name. He was forever named Poodle Banger, and that's how I will always remember him. Well, as much as I'm not a fan of ruining someone's reputation by spreading something around with a bunch of people and making them ostracized, here, I gotta say I don't hate it. This is some weird, wacky behavior that definitely should be recognized as wrong, right? Like, when are you supposed to learn that banging a dog is wrong? Pretty early, I would think. Almost implicitly. It just isn't how nature wants it to be done. I'm sorry. Story 15. My wife's cousin moved in with us for about 6 months. After she came back from San Francisco, she brought her full-grown standard poodle. I come home from work and open the door to see her literally bear-hugging the dog and vehemently tugging at the dog's butt. I stare for a second, and right as I start to ask what the hell she's doing, she pulls a bloody, crappy thing from the dog. It had gotten into the trash and eaten her used tampon, and she noticed this because the dog was walking weird and, upon further inspection, had seen the string hanging out. Story 16. About 11 p.m. one October night in Cambridge, Massachusetts, about 8 years ago, I saw a man in a beret who had locked himself out of his car, which was a little 2-door Peugeot. He left a small dog inside, a little white fluffy thing. In a heavy French accent, he's yelling at the dog, "Open the door! Open the door!" The dog is just wagging its tail and has no clue, predictably. Yet the French guy just keeps trying over and over to absolutely no effect. If my wife weren't there with me, I would have sworn it was a delusion. Story 17. Friend of mine spent the night. He woke me up because he was humping the spare mattress. I acted like it wasn't happening. A year later, he stayed over again. I was playing Star Wars Galaxies and he was on my bed watching Too Fast, Too Furious. Dude starts humping the mattress again, while I was maybe 3 feet away and still awake. Like, if you wanted to hump a mattress, I've got better movies for that, man. I gotta say, I think there might be something a little too comfortable with the homies about that one. Maybe keep that one for yourself, brother. Story 18. My mom just told me about someone she came across at a lake somewhere in southwest Colorado today. She sees an outhouse and heads towards it, but hears a trumpet, which of course makes no sense. As she gets to the outhouse, she is sure it's coming from inside, but it says occupied. It sounds like live music. So she knocks and the trumpeting stops and the door opens. There's a guy, about 65, standing there fully clothed with his trumpet in hand and the music sheet over the open toilet hole. He says, "Oh, you need to use this." All kinds of what the hell. Story 19. My friend's bachelor party, we all got screwed up in Minneapolis. Very cool city. Most of us were connected only through the groom, so we randomly picked roommates at the hotel. Our most soft-spoken and socially awkward friend got roomed up with the bride's brother, who none of us really knew. Dude got hammered beyond belief and had to go back to the hotel, and the rest of us kept partying. Our socially awkward friend went back to his room, walked into the bathroom, and there was the dude, drunk, naked, and staring at himself in the mirror. He asked if everything was okay. Dude just kept staring, so naturally he held it in and went straight to bed. After laying down for 30 or 40 minutes unable to sleep because of the already strange things afoot in the hotel, dude came out of the bathroom, still naked, and stood at the foot of the socially awkward guy's bed, staring at him. Our friend likes to avoid confrontation, so he didn't say anything. Just cringed, afraid of what was to come. But nothing. He stared at him naked for about 15 minutes and then went back to bed. We were wondering why those two were so quiet on the ride back home. It all made sense after the story was told. Story 20. I was talking to my mom in her bedroom. It was nighttime and she told me she was going to go to bed. I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty tired too. Good night," and walked out of the room, closing the door behind me. As I'm walking to my room, I realized I'd forgotten to ask her something. So I walked back into her room and she was pleasuring herself. Keep in mind, this was within the span of 5 seconds. I literally closed her door, walked like 3 steps, and immediately turned back. Hey, she had business to get done. I know it's weird because it's your mom, but like, I was gonna say when nature calls, that's not quite what that means, but it almost is. Story 21. I work in a restaurant, and for a while we've had a dishwasher who is kinda weird. The dish pit was in the basement with the prep and dry storage, so he was by himself most of the time. One night I went downstairs to get something from the dry storage room, and I walked in on him to find the 5-gallon container of sugar open on the prep table. He was just shoveling handfuls of straight-up dry sugar into his mouth, like a man in the desert drinking water from the oasis. His back was kind of turned toward me a bit, so he didn't see me, and I was so shocked it took me like 10 seconds to react, just standing in the doorway confused, until I managed to say, "Hey dude, what are you doing?" His reaction? Put the lid back on the container, walk past me to the dish pit, and casually resume washing dishes. I was perplexed. Story 22. My ex-girlfriend from a few years ago was pretty exploratory. At first I liked it and was getting into it, because we were doing stuff like tying up, whips, etc. But then she told me she wanted me to act like a dog and bang her. I thought she meant doggy style, so I said sure. Then she stopped me and said she wanted me to pant like a dog, be on all fours, and bang her like a dog would. Needless to say, this weirded me out. I told her that I didn't want to do that. I went home that night and we didn't talk for a few days because it felt a little too weird. I'm guessing she felt the same. Finally, a few days later, I decided to go over to her house and surprise her. Not that I was going to act like a dog, but I figured I would at least apologize for not talking and being distant. I wanted to talk it out and just move on naturally from the weirdness. Well, as you could guess, the reason she wanted me to act like a dog is because she's into that. I walked into her room and she was on all fours with her dog banging her like crazy. It was just awful seeing that. I yelled at the sight, she freaked out, and I just got the hell out. She tried contacting me multiple times after that to talk about it, and I just said nope. So yeah, that wasn't fun. If I had a nickel for each story in here about someone banging a dog, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Story 23. This post reminded me of something that happened to a friend several years ago. There was this girl who was kinda weird and just got kicked out of wherever she was living. My friend let her stay with him for a while. Eventually, he had some suspicions that she was going into his bedroom while he was at work. So one day he set up a camera in an inconspicuous place, and when he came home and reviewed the video, he sent it to me. The girl went into his room, sat on his bed, got completely naked, and then shaved her private on his bed and took breaks between shaving to pet his cat. Story 24. Banging in a pile of sushi. So, I worked in a grocery store that had a small plug-in cooler for sushi and bentos. One night I was doing the overnight, and around 2 a.m. I come out of one of the aisles to witness a very drunk/frisky couple going at it. I yell at them, "Hey, what the hell are you doing? Stop it." The guy stops for a minute, turns to me, makes eye contact, and then just goes back to humping away. Being a minimum wage worker with a strong union to back me up, I let my training kick in and dealt with the situation properly. And by that, I mean I went on break and left a note for my manager saying, "We need new sushi." I guess if they're doing it in a pile of sushi, you could say they're doing it raw. Story 25. When my brother and I were about 9 and 10, probably, we used to be really obsessed with WWF wrestling. And I don't know if anyone remembers the wrestler that went by the name Rikishi, but he had this signature move called the stink face, where he would rub his giant 400-pound butt in the other wrestler's face while they were pinned to the bottom ropes. Well, my brother and I used to imitate wrestlers all the time in either of our bedrooms, and we would wrestle on the beds. This one time I was imitating Rikishi, and seeing how I was winning the match, it was time for me to perform said move. Well, I thought it would be hilariously demeaning to my brother if I pulled my pants and underwear down to perform this move. Just as I do this, my father walks into the room and sees my bare butt stuffed in my brother's face. He completely flips the frick out. For some unknown reason, he thought that my brother was eating my butt. Why this would be the first thing to come to his mind still to this day baffles me. He runs downstairs screaming for my mother, and she has to explain to him that it's a wrestling move and that kids are just being kids. On one hand, I understand why it's kind of weird that he immediately thought that. On the other, sometimes you see something and you just call it like you see it. And from the description, OP, it kind of sounds like it, you know? Anyway, this thread was filled with great stories, so I hope you enjoyed. I also hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.